how to trigger an avoidance to reconnect with you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever cared so deeply for someone, but every time you got closer, they pulled away? You reached out with your heart and they reached for the exit. Listen, this isn't about blame. This isn't about fixing someone. This is about understanding a core truth. People avoid what feels unsafe. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because connection, intimacy, vulnerability, those things feel like danger. And if you're chasing them from a place of anxiety, pain, or need, all they feel is pressure. Pressure triggers their defense system. But here's the breakthrough. You can shift the dynamic without manipulation. You can lead by example. You can become the invitation, not the pursuer. You can create emotional gravity. You want to reconnect? You want to pull them back in? Then stop chasing. Start rising. You want to trigger something and then trigger curiosity, trigger safety, trigger respect. Here's the truth. When you change your energy, the relationship recalibrates. When you come from strength, not scarcity, they feel the difference. They feel safe again. And when people feel safe, they lean in. It starts with you, because when you evolve, everything around you evolves with you. The first thing we have to understand, deeply understand, is that people don't run from love. They run from the conditions they associate with love. They run from the emotions that feel overwhelming, from the pressure to show up in ways they're not ready for, and from environments that don't feel emotionally safe. That's especially true for people with avoidant attachment styles. Their nervous system has been wired over time through pain or conditioning to associate closeness with risk. And when something feels risky to the nervous system, it gets flagged as a threat, even if the heart wants connection. So what do most people do when they feel someone pulling away? They do the exact opposite of what works. They reach harder. They call, text, question, beg, explain. They overexpress, overfunction, and over-deliver emotionally. All of it comes from love, yes, but it also comes from fear. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When your communication is driven by fear, it creates exactly the result you're afraid of. That energy of urgency, of please don't leave, makes the avoidant feel cornered, like they're losing their autonomy. And when people feel cornered, they don't open, they escape. You might think your effort is a gesture of connection, but to someone with an avoidant pattern, it can feel like pressure, and pressure to them equals danger. So they detach even more. It's not personal, it's protective. That's why the work here isn't about figuring how to get them back. The real work is about learning how to create an environment where their nervous system feels safe enough to return on its own. That means removing the emotional expectation. It means showing up with calm instead of chaos, with grounded energy instead of panic. When you're communicating with someone who has an avoidant tendency, your energy speaks louder than your words. If your message is calm, but your energy is frantic, they will feel that dissonance and retreat. But if your message is simple and your energy is grounded, they'll begin to feel like we're not being pushed. They'll feel like they can breathe. And that's when connection starts to become possible again. You don't need to manipulate or play games. That's not what this is about. This is about shifting your own energy into a place of emotional responsibility. Because when you feel safe within yourself, people feel safe around you. And avoidants are always reading your emotional temperature. If they sense that being around you requires them to regulate your emotions, they will instinctively distance themselves to protect their own peace. But if they sense that you are regulating yourself, that you don't need them to fix or fill anything in you, they start to feel differently. They start to feel curious, drawn in, even inspired. You become the safe space. You become the place where connection can land instead of the form they're trying to avoid. Look, this doesn't mean you shrink yourself or suppress your needs. Emotional safety isn't about silence. It's about clarity. You can express your truth, but you do it without demand, without blame, without making your peace dependent on their response. That's power. That's emotional maturity. And that kind of energy, steady, clear, strong, it changes the dynamic. We're not here to trigger someone into coming back out of guilt or obligation. We're here to create an environment where coming back feels like their choice. That's when it becomes real. That's when it becomes lasting. People with avoidant tendencies don't need more pressure. They need more permission. Permission to take a breath, permission to reconnect with themselves, permission to return without fear of being overwhelmed. And the person who gives them that permission, it can be you, but only if you give it to yourself first. So take the pressure off, not because you're giving up, but because you're stepping into a higher way of relating. You're becoming the kind of person that people feel safe around. And when someone feels safe with you, truly safe, they don't run, they lean in. Even the avoidant, especially the avoidant. There's a moment in every relationship where one person feels the disconnection and starts to panic. That panic often turns into pursuit. You start texting more, checking in more, overthinking every word, every silence, every shift in energy. You start chasing not because you're needy or weak, but because you care deeply and you want to fix what feels like it's slipping away. But here's the truth. Chasing never brings someone closer. It pushes them further, because chasing communicates one message loud and clear. I need you to feel okay inside myself. When someone senses that they are responsible for your emotional stability, especially someone with avoidant tendencies, it doesn't make them feel loved. It makes them feel trapped. And people don't stay where they feel trapped, they flee. This is why we have to flip the script. We have to stop chasing and start leading. Leading is not about control. It's not about dominance. It's not about convincing someone to come back. It's about becoming so anchored in who you are that your presence itself becomes a form of leadership. It's about saying through your actions and your energy, I know my worth. I know my center. I am not going to beg for love. I am going to embody it. When you chase, you lower your frequency. You lead over your power. You let someone else's behavior determine your state of being. But when you lead, you reclaim that power. You say, I'm going to show you how this relationship can look. I'm going to hold the standard. I'm going to live the example. That shift is magnetic because people are drawn to those who are grounded. They're drawn to confidence, not arrogance, but the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't scream or demand, but simply is. Leadership in relationships looks like emotional responsibility. It looks like owning your feelings without projecting them. It looks like setting boundaries, not to punish, but to protect your peace. It looks like creating a life that's so full and so vibrant that your value becomes undeniable. When someone sees that you are not falling apart in their absence, that you're thriving, not performing, not attending, but genuinely thriving, they begin to wonder what they lost. Not because you're trying to trigger that reaction, but because truthfully, you've risen. The chase is often driven by fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of being misunderstood, fear that love is going to disappear. But leadership is fueled by vision. It's fueled by knowing that love shouldn't have to be hunted down. Love should be invited in. And when you hold that belief, it shows. It shows in the way you communicate, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you interact with someone who's pulling away. You no longer plead. You no longer grasp. You no longer perform. You simply hold your position. Sometimes that means stepping back, not as a tactic, not as a game, but as a declaration. I refuse to engage in dynamics that require me to lose myself. You don't chase someone who's walking away. You let them go and you stand still in your truth. Maybe they come back, maybe they don't. But what you've done is recentered your power. You've taken yourself out of the reactive mode and stepped into the creator mode. You've stopped asking, what do I need to do to get them to stay? And started asking, who do I need to become to be at peace no matter what? That shift right there is the game changer. It's what separates trauma from depth, panic from purpose, desperation from direction. You don't need to follow someone who's drifting. You need to lead yourself so powerfully that they remember who you are. And if they don't, that's clarity too. Because the person who's meant to walk beside you doesn't need to be chased. They recognize your value. They meet you in the middle. They feel your strength and say, yes, that's someone I want to move toward. Leadership isn't loud. It's not about making a statement to the world. It's about making a commitment to yourself, that you will never again abandon yourself for the sake of keeping someone else around, that you'll no longer twist yourself into knots just to feel seen, that you will choose your peace over their presence if it ever comes to that. And when you operate from that place, you won't need to chase anyone ever again, because now you're leading, and that's where the magic happens. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop trying to pull someone toward you and instead become someone they naturally gravitate toward. That shift is called emotional gravity. It's not something you chase. It's not something you force, something you become. Emotional gravity is when your energy, your presence, your calm confidence speaks louder than words. It's when your very existence becomes an invitation, not a demand, for connection. The truth is, we're all drawn to people who radiate self-trust, people who are at peace with themselves, who don't need to prove anything, who don't panic when things get quiet. That kind of energy is rare. It's powerful, and it's the exact opposite of emotional urgency. Emotional gravity pulls people in because it feels like safety. It feels like curiosity. It feels like, I don't need you to complete me, but you're welcome here if you choose to be. Think about it. When you're anxious, constantly checking your phone, obsessing over their responses, try to decode their every move, you're operating from scarcity. That energy doesn't attract, it repels. It makes people feel like they're stepping into a contract, not a connection. But when you step into your wholeness, when you slow down, when you hold yourself with quiet certainty, everything changes. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. You stop waiting for someone to validate your worth because you've already claimed it internally. Emotional gravity is built through your relationship with you, how you speak to yourself, how you show up when no one's watching, how you respond to rejection or distance, when you can hold your own energy, when you can self-soothe instead of react, when you can breathe through discomfort without needing someone else to fix it. That's gravity. That's the kind of presence people remember even when you're not around. Avoidants, especially, are highly sensitive to emotional climates. They feel when someone is trying to manage them. They sense when connection is tied to control. But when you carry yourself with emotional gravity, they sense something very different. They sense freedom. And freedom is the one thing an avoidant values above all else. When someone feels free to come closer, without pressure, without expectation, they often do come closer. Not because you manipulated them into it, but because you created space for them to choose it on their own. Creating emotional gravity means showing, not telling. You show through how you move, through how you live, through the life you build around you that doesn't collapse in someone's absence. You stop narrating your worth and start embodying it. You stop hoping they'll remember what they had. And instead, you become someone unforgettable, to become the version of yourself that doesn't need the chase, because the energy you carry does the work for you. This isn't about being cold. This isn't about pretending not to care. It's about caring deeply while still remaining deeply rooted in your own power. You're allowed to feel, you're allowed to want connection. But when you can want something without needing it to feel whole, that's when you become magnetic. That's when people start leaning in. You don't create emotional gravity overnight. You build it through repetition, through choices, through showing up for yourself over and over again until it's no longer an act. It's who you are. And once that switch flips, everything changes. You stop chasing clarity because your clarity comes from within. You stop chasing people because your energy is already doing the calling. And the right people, especially the ones who once pulled away, will feel it. They'll feel the shift. And when they do, they'll move toward you, not out of obligation, but because now being near you feels like peace. When someone pulls away from you, especially someone with an avoidant attachment style, it's natural to want to fix the situation. You feel the disconnection, and your nervous system screams for resolution. So you send the text, you ask the question, you replay the last conversation 100 times in your head. You go into mental overdrive trying to figure out what went wrong. That reaction is human. But if you want to truly reconnect, it's not the reaction that brings results. What creates real reconnection isn't urgency, it's calm. Avoidants are especially sensitive to emotional intent. It doesn't matter whether the intensity comes from anger, sadness, or even love. If it feels overwhelming or intrusive, their instinct is to retreat. It's not because they don't care. It's because their internal system interprets intensity as danger. They've learned, often through early experiences, that closeness can lead to being engulfed, controlled, or hurt. So when they sense emotional waves crashing toward them, they pull away to protect their inner balance. This is why your calm matters more than your words. You can say all the right things, but if your energy is coming from desperation or fear, they'll feel it. They'll feel like they're being pulled into an emotional storm, and the response will be to put up walls. But if your presence communicates safety, if your vibe is steady, accepting, grounded, those same walls begin to soften. That's the paradox. The less you try to force connection, the more space you create for it to return. Being the calm doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It doesn't mean you act like you don't care or that nothing bothers you. That's not calm, that's avoidance in disguise. Being calm means you own your emotions, but you don't let them own you. You feel the pain, but you don't act from it. You give yourself space to process before reacting. You move with intention, not impulse. When you operate from calm, you become a mirror of emotional regulation. That's powerful. It tells the other person, you don't have to manage my emotions to be close to me. And for an avoidant, That's one of the biggest green lights you can give. It lowers their defenses. It shows them that closeness doesn't have to mean chaos, that love doesn't have to come wrapped in pressure or panic. There's a certain power in being the calm. It's quiet, but undeniable. It doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it invites. It says, I know who I am, I can hold space for myself, I can hold space for you too, if and when you're ready. That kind of presence creates curiosity, it builds trust, it draws people in because it feels safe, and safe is exactly what the avoidant nervous system craves underneath all the distancing. And let's be real, being the calm isn't always easy. It takes discipline. It takes emotional maturity. It takes a commitment to choosing long-term connection over short-term reaction. It means sometimes sitting with discomfort instead of texting right away. It means letting go of control and leaning into faith. Faith in yourself, in your growth, in the idea that if it's meant to reconnect, it will do so not through force, but through flow. You don't need to storm into someone's life to be seen. You don't need to make waves to be heard. Sometimes the most magnetic thing you can do is become the stillness they didn't know they were missing. The person who doesn't just talk about love, but embodies it through presence, through peace, through unwavering self-trust. And when you show up like that, they feel the difference because you're not the storm anymore. You're the calm in the middle of it. One of the hardest things to do when someone starts pulling away, especially someone you care about, is to not follow them. Everything in you wants to close the gap. You want to reach out, explain, fix, reconnect. But when you're dealing with someone with an avoidant attachment style, that instinct to close the space can backfire. To them, space isn't rejection. It's regulation. It's how they find their sense of balance again. So if you want any chance of them coming back on their own terms, the first thing you need to do is respect their space fully without resistance. Respecting space doesn't mean you agree with their distance. It doesn't mean you stop caring or shut down your own heart. What it means is you understand the space serves a purpose, even if it's uncomfortable for you. Pushing into that space too soon tells them, I care more about fixing my anxiety than honoring your needs, and that only reaffirms their fear that closeness equals pressure. But when you allow space without bitterness or manipulation, it signals something entirely different. It says, I trust your process, and I trust mine. Because here's the next part that most people forget. It's not just about respecting their space. It's about owning yours. That means instead of obsessing over what they're doing with their distance, you get really intentional about what you're doing with your time, your energy, your focus. You use the space to come back home to yourself, to rediscover the parts of you that may have gotten lost in the chase, to reconnect with your own center, your own clarity, your own boundaries. Owning your space is powerful. It flips the dynamic. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer shrinking. You're no longer holding your breath, hoping they return. You're living. You're creating. You're healing. And in that energy, something incredible happens. Your sense of self gets louder than your longing. And the person on the other end, even if they can't explain it logically, feels the shift. They sense that you're no longer dependent on their presence to feel. Oh, that's the kind of energy that attracts, not repels. Avoidants tend to respond best when they feel they have room to breathe and the freedom to choose. But they also respond to strength, not the kind that masks pain, but the kind that says, I can hold both my love for you and my love for me. That's what owning your space looks like. It's not cold, it's clear. It's not distant, it's grounded. Doesn't mean you don't want them, means you won't lose yourself over them. And maybe they come back. Maybe they don't. But either way, you've won something deeper. You've reestablished the most important connection of all, the one with yourself. That inner alignment becomes your emotional anchor. It keeps you steady regardless of what they do. It reminds you that space is not a punishment, it's an opportunity. And if they return, they're returning to someone who knows their worth, not someone who abandoned themselves to keep the connection alive. So give the space, but don't just sit in it, stand in it. Fill it with your growth. Fill it with your joy. Fill it with your truth. Let it become a container for your evolution, not your waiting room. Because when you respect their space and own yours, you stop being the person trying to pull them back, and you become the person they feel drawn to come back to. Not because you chased, not because you pleaded, but because you rose. You can say all the right things, write the perfect message, explain your intentions with clarity and depth. But if your energy doesn't match your words, it won't land. Not with someone who's avoidant, not with someone who's sensitive to emotional undercurrents. These individuals may not always articulate what they're feeling, but they can feel everything. They are tuned in to what's behind your voice, what's hiding underneath your text, what your silence is saying, even when your words are trying to say something else. That's why your energy, your presence, your tone, your nervous system state matters more than the words you use. Because energy is the truth. Energy doesn't lie. And for someone who already finds closeness difficult, who often equates intimacy with overwhelm, your energy will tell them whether being around you feels like pressure or peace, whether it feels like guilt or grace, whether it feels like obligation or openness. When you speak from fear, your words might be soft, but your energy will feel heavy. When you speak from neediness, you might say, I understand, but they'll feel the pull of emotional demand underneath. And that's when they back away, not because they don't care, but because they feel like your inner state is something they're being asked to manage. That's not connection. That's emotional weight. And the avoidant will retreat every time they sense it. But when you've done the inner work, when you've regulated your own nervous system, when you've processed your emotions before delivering them, your energy becomes clear, grounded, neutral, but not numb. You don't need to explain as much because your presence already says what needs to be said. Your calmness becomes the communication. Your ease becomes the invitation. You stop trying to get them to come closer, and instead your very state of being draws them in. Letting your energy speak louder than words is about showing that you're no longer in state of emotional pursuit. You're not trying to fix or convince. You're not secretly waiting for a specific response. You're simply rooted in your own alignment. And that kind of energy is incredibly attractive, not in a flashy, loud way, but in a way that feels like home. It feels safe. It feels steady. It says, I'm not here to change you. I'm here to be me. Fully, freely. And if that resonates, you're welcome here. Sometimes that means choosing silence over explanation. Sometimes that means not responding right away. Not as a game, but because you're genuinely not operating from urgency. You've slowed down enough to choose your words from truth, not tension. You've shifted from trying to make them feel something to simply feeling whole yourself. That's a high frequency place to be. That's when everything changes. Avoidants are drawn to emotional consistency. They may not know how to articulate it, but deep down, they crave someone whose energy doesn't spike and crash, whose moods don't rise and fall based on attention or validation. If you can be that steady presence, not by force, but through genuine internal stability, you become the exact type of connection they didn't realize they could feel safe in. They feel your energy before they feel your love. So if your energy feels calm, clear, and unburdened, they begin to relax. Let your energy carry the message your words can't quite reach. Let it say, I'm good with myself, I care for you, but I don't need you to complete me. Let it show that you've moved from reaction to creation, from fear to trust, from chasing to attracting. Because when your energy aligns with peace, people don't just hear it, they feel it. And that feeling, that's what reconnects. And so, if there's one truth to carry with you, it's this: real connection isn't forced, it's felt. When you stop chasing, start leading, hold your power and let your energy speak, you become the safe space they didn't even know they needed. Whether they come back or not, you've already won, because you've returned to yourself. Thank you for showing up with an open heart, for choosing growth over reaction, and for trusting the process. Till next time, stay grounded, stay powerful, and goodbye for now.